So welcome back. We are going to draw another Capricho copy by Goya. This one, however, is not a drawing. This is a print. This is the way the Caprichos were issued to the public, was in the form of these little etchings. This one seems to be a drawing of monks or friars eating supper. So what I want to focus on today is just how wonderful it is to compose with people, because creating composition with people in it is almost like creating an abstract design, because you have so much control over the way you pose them, and the design potential of a drawing with people is just so much greater than like a still life or a landscape, in my view, because people are so posable. So let's start with this guy's kind of long head, the guy on the left. We're going to try to imagine his rib cage. There's a really strong kind of line of action through this figure, like this. And if you think that just happened to be the way this guy was sitting one day, I'm afraid you're misunderstanding something important, because this is probably worked up from a drawing done from imagination. He would have had the idea for this design, drawn it from imagination, and then gotten some models to pose in more or less these positions to do little studies of like the hands and the drapery folds. But and that's partly why the drawings done in this time period, to me, are so much more compelling than just about anything I see done today, because today artists really don't work this way. They don't know enough to compose the figure imaginatively like this. What they do instead is just like take pictures of people and then draw the photographs. Pretty much what they see. And I'm afraid I'm guilty of that as well. So I'm just kind of, let me indicate what I'm thinking of now. The movement of this arm, sort of like this, and I'm going to draw I'm going to think about simplifying this big shape down here, blocking it in. It's not that complicated to begin with, and with any figure seated or standing, it's useful to find the center of the pose, which is just around the waist. So make sure that this is sort of your center. And notice that the knee projects just a little bit out from this diagonal, which is about maybe 50 degrees from horizontal. So this is sort of a rough approximation of the pose, and we're not going to finish this guy. We're going to block everything in really simply. And again, the goal is that it would be a wonderful thing if you could do anything approximating this from your head. And obviously, it's anything we do from our heads is going to be much cruder than what Goya could do, because his knowledge about drawing things in the world was so much more advanced than ours. But I want you to contemplate just how wonderful it would be to be able to create a composition like this. from imagination. So I'm starting blocking the frame. I'm going to look for the center of the frame now. That's going to help me place the other head. You see how centered that one is? So make sure your frame is tall enough, and then go ahead and very lightly draw this X. And notice that this head is slightly above the level of the one to its left. So we're going to shoot up about 20 degrees like that, and we're going to plug that second head in to this position. The shoulder coming down and connecting with this guy's nose, and the other shoulder connecting with the table. This other head on the right, keep all your lines very light and try to keep up with me. I'll give you time to make corrections in a minute. This other head is at the same level as the top of the one on the left, but it's a little shorter. His mouth is not wide open. So we're going to place that head there. And this last figure is perched up with his head just inside this diagonal. And before we go into detail on any of these figures, we're going to just use your first shading direction, and we're going to plug in our main darks so we can appreciate this as a kind of abstract design. Was there a big pool of shadow to the left of this guy's head? I kind of doubt it. I mean, I doubt this scene ever existed in this fashion. You got to get away from the idea that drawing is just a matter of documenting what you see. This is a very freely composed drawing, and I would say that he put his darks where he felt they would look good. His shadow shapes all support the design itself. So let's put in all the main darks. Keep it loose and fast, and then we're just gonna pause and appreciate the energy of this design, which is pretty amazing. And that's about it. So as students, you guys are all pretty hung up on what's called rendering. Like, can I get the proportions right? Can I get the expression right? Can I make it look like these guys? The realm we're in now is the realm of two-dimensional design. it's like how much does it make sense the way these shapes of dark are composed within the boundary of this rectangle? And hopefully you can all appreciate that this is a beautiful and logical arrangement of darks with a lot of strong movements. I already mentioned this one. There's another diagonal that's set up by the direction of these heads going this way that's kind of opposes this main diagonal. And then there are a few strong horizontals that are kind of counterpoints to the basic X shape. I would say the main strategy of this design is kind of an X. But what I really want to focus on is just how much freedom Goya enjoyed as a designer because he's working with human figures and because he's able to pose them the way you'd be able to pose like a movable doll or something. Like he could put these figures any way he wanted, and that's a wonderful thing. Okay, I'm going to pause for a minute and I'll be right back. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about today is the way that the gaze, the direction of the gaze of figures in a composition like this also help to lead our eyes around the frame. So we're going to get in here and do these. These are examples of what might be is sometimes called grotesques. Like these are obviously meant to be sort of repulsive figures, but they're not caricatures of anyone in particular. They're just sort of general grotesques. And notice as I go in with my darker line, I'm freely altering some of my proportions and trying to improve on my work. I'm never just mindlessly tracing over my lines. I am, this was my first draft, and now I'm going to get in and be more specific. And I'm pressing really hard now because I'm not going to. This is like a two-shot drawing. One shot for the rough in, and then a second shot. I'm using my pencil almost like an ink pen right now. Like I'm not thinking about making any more corrections. I'm just going to try to get it as best I can. Look at this guy's gaping mouth and these two front teeth, the gap in between them, the way the muzzle kind of wraps around behind the teeth. This has a lot in common with what we would call a cartoon. Right? It's like a version of a person that's obviously not studied closely from life, but inspired by observation of different types of people. This, as I said, is an etching. One quality of etchings is a consistent line weight. Like when you're etching on a metal plate, you can't make some lines thicker and some lines thinner. To make a dark area, you just have to make a lot more lines. And to make a light area, you make less lines, but all your lines are going to etch to about the same darkness. So it's not a flexible medium like a pen. And that makes copying it a little bit simpler because we're just using a very consistent pressure with the pencil. And don't worry if your drawing's not exactly right. This is the kind of copy, as I keep saying, that's really a matter of like, just copy all the lines as a little record that we've actually looked at them, and not like we got them all perfect. We're trying to understand what Goya was up to here and appreciate the drawing. So I roughed in the location of this hand. I hope you did too. Look at that fleshy thumb muscle here. And look how beautifully he's got this gesture of the thumb like pressing down on the plate. And this finger wrapping around under the plate. And the big knuckle. This other finger coming around from behind. And this almost feels like wrinkly or saggy flesh. And then this, I guess it's a plate, or it could be some kind of a... Is that a utensil? Oh yeah, that's the end of his spoon, isn't it? This is the front of the spoon over here. So then right inside the mouth here, we've got this hand of this other guy. We didn't rough that in, so I'm gonna help you out by just finding a way to think about it as basically a tilted square to start with. And even the angle of this square kind of reinforces the angle of this guy's head. Can you see that? Again, not an accident. It's all carefully designed. So we've got these three main fingers inside the square. And I know I'm going fast today. I really want you to just keep up. I don't care how bad it is. It's like if you're trying to learn a language and you only let yourself speak very, very slowly so you wouldn't make any mistakes, you wouldn't learn that language very well, right? You've got to force yourself to speak at a normal pace. And drawing's the same way. Sometimes you have to learn to rush a little. You're going to make mistakes, but you're just going to learn what it feels like to go at the normal artist's pace versus the kind of slow crawl that some of you like to go at most of the time. I can see, like, I made this hand too big. I don't have enough room between this hand and this head, but I'm just going for it. We're not stopping and moving stuff around. Probably some of you got that proportion better than I did, but I hope I've made it clear the difference between a grotesque and a caricature. Who knows? These could be caricatures of people Goya had seen, but I think mainly they're just like done again from memory of types. This guy has got an incredibly broad upturned nose, unlike anything you'd see in real life. And look at how close his eyes are to the top of his olive forms on the nose. It's like that really gives us a strong sense that we're looking up at this head. And he's got these beady little eyes. You could fit 2 or 3 eyes in between his eyes, so the eye spacing is very, very exaggerated. And the fun thing about copying a grotesque is that you can do a lot of things wrong and still end up with something that's grotesque. Like, there's only one path towards making these people look normal, but there are a million paths that will result in these people looking at least as weird as they look in Goya's drawing, and that's what we're after. So the tradition of grotesques is very connected to a tradition of social commentary. So this seems to be a comment on the gluttony of the priestly class of Goya's time. The priests they would collect a lot of money from the people at this time in Spain and would live pretty well compared to the poor, which is obviously not was not very Christian of them. And Goya, I'm guessing, maybe if anyone knows more about this, they can explain in the comments, but he seems to be commenting on the excesses of the priestly class. One of the most important things to learn how to compose when you're doing something like this is where you put your blacks. Notice how strong this dark is here. Just like this dark on the side of this guy's head. This dark cast shadow. And if you ask me, it's composed as freely as Jackson Pollock composed with drips. You've probably heard of Jackson Pollock. He would put a canvas on the floor and just throw paint at it. So he was composing with ultimate freedom. Like, he could put a drip anywhere. And if you ask me, an artist like this was composing just as freely, but using people instead of drips. And since most people find drawings of people more interesting than paintings of dripped paint, well, at least I do. I could look at this all day long, and I get very bored with a Jackson Pollock. Basically, a 5-year-old can compose drips freely, but it takes a master to compose with people as freely. Look at the beautiful gesture of this little hand with here's the thumb kind of crooked around. Here's this finger arching up over and resting on the table. I mean, you can feel the weight of these fingertips on the table. And it's all done with just, I think last time I used the word economy. It's really important to understand what economy means in art. Economy means doing a lot with a little, making a few lines that describe a complicated pose more clearly in this case than a much more detailed study probably would. So one of the interesting things about this drawing is the way this little this head back here is really significantly smaller than the head of the guy next to it, which helps force the idea that he's behind this guy. There's his huge nose. His squinty little eyes. I'm also going to note that when you're doing an etching, you're scratching with a sharp stylus onto a metal plate that's covered with tar, and you can barely see your lines because the lines they don't show up as black on white. They show up as little bits of bright copper showing up against a dark ground. So, and everything's backwards. So you don't really see the image until you print it. So it's almost like doing a whole drawing like this more or less blind. Like you really, he couldn't see any of the effects he was producing with the darks until he pulled the final print from the printing press. And that's makes it all the more amazing that he could get these kind of effects. And when you look at this figure that I just put in, understand that from a design perspective, there's a lot moving from left to right, and there a lot of these diagonals would threaten to just move our eyes right off the page. But notice that this figure up here, looking down, sort of redirects our gaze. And so instead of sliding off the page up to the right, we hit this figure and we instinctively follow his gaze down to this guy because he's looking downward towards this guy. And then this guy is looking strongly to our left. So that kind of closes the loop and our eye moves strongly to the left towards the first figure that we drew. So it's not only our ability to pose the limbs, but to indicate where people are looking in a drawing like this that gives us the kind of design freedom that I'm talking about. Okay, this guy's really hunched over. Here's a whole other beautiful little hand gestural. Look at that little thumb kind of kicking up. These fingers wrapping around. We can not only read the gesture of this hand, but we can read just how kind of gnarly it is, like, or gnarled. Like, these are kind of aged, gluttonous figures. Look at the exaggeration of this brow ridge and the way he uses the dark behind it to really bring it out, and the bony kind of cheekbone. And we got another pair of hands up here. I'm just going to sketch them. They're very simplified, gestural little hands. There's the knuckles and then some fingers coming around underneath, but we're going to leave that just like that. He's got a plate with looks like a hunk of cheese on it or something. And it's also no accident that this figure in back is less detailed than the ones in the front. This is an example of what landscape painters call atmospheric perspective. When things are far away, the mass of air between our eyes and the thing we're looking at makes them less contrasty. Like the darks get a little lighter and the lights get a little darker, and also less clearly focused. And an artist like Goya used that device to represent the fact that this guy is like, a foot or two further away than the guy in front of him. Obviously, it's not, at that distance, this guy would not have been out of focus. It's an effect that we're used to seeing because of photography. As I've explained before, cameras with wide apertures, things that are further, that are out of the focal range of the lens are going to be blurrier than the things that are in focal range. But it's really interesting to see it in a drawing like this that represents such a narrow field of vision, and to think about that he did that before anyone had ever seen a photograph, because this is centuries before the development of photography. So this is also an example of just how much more important it is to shade the volume of the head than it is to get all the features exactly right. You see how the features are very simplified, but the dark, even the dark on the hair over here and on the side of the face, it creates a very clear volume, and then this exaggerated cast shadow under the head helps reinforce that idea. Okay, these darks are important too, and look at his choice here of doing this entire wall with horizontal lines. One of the reasons I require my students to learn cross-hatching is because it gives you the freedom to pick up something like etching later in life. If you only rely on smudging your edges, the transition to a medium like this that requires hatching is very difficult. If you're used to hatching, it's very easy. And I'm almost done here. Just need to find a way to include some of the darks in the bottom portion of the etching. This being the main one. And another really important dark is this cast shadow underneath his skirt. There's a cast shadow right here along the front of his robe. And a really hard dark outline there. And a lot of cast shadow underneath the tablecloth on this side. And finally, there's a very strong cast shadow of the sleeve onto the onto his lap right here. So we can get very hung up on originality. When I was a kid, my art teachers all discouraged copying because they thought that, I wouldn't ever be an original artist if I did copies. That's really as stupid as telling somebody who wants to compose music that they shouldn't ever learn how to play the music other people have written. Obviously, it's a really good idea to play the scores that other people have written before you try writing one of your own. And I feel the same way about doing master copies, especially if you can kind of get over yourself and let yourself do them quickly and fluidly, like I demonstrated today. Not caring so much that they're perfect, but just caring that we've taken the time to study and understand the original in a way that's transcends the understanding that anyone can have by just standing and looking at it. And you see, as I'm completing the copy, I'm really focusing on where the blacks are. And as I do that, I'm just appreciating how beautifully they are arranged within the frame. And I hope you can appreciate that too. It's like very, very intentional. So I want my copy to be balanced in the same way that the original is balanced. And since I feel like it sort of is now, I'm going to end this video. Students in the classroom are going to have a little more time to finish. But that's going to do it for us. Thanks for watching.